He was the greatest conqueror the world has ever seen. By the age of 30, Alexander had done what no one before him had even dreamed of. He'd crushed the mighty Persian Empire, the superpower of the ancient world, in a series of battles that still echo through history. He'd conquered Egypt without a fight. They opened their gates and crowned him pharaoh, calling him son of a god. He'd marched his armies through the punishing mountains of Afghanistan, through the scorching deserts of Iran, and deep into the forests of India, where his soldiers faced war elephants for the first time and somehow, impossibly, won. His empire stretched from the shores of Greece all the way to the Himalayas. 3 continents, millions of people, dozens of cultures and languages and gods, all under one man's rule. He was 32 years old, and the world was his. Then he died. And here's where the story gets strange. Here's where history stops making sense and the mystery begins. His body was prepared in the most elaborate way the ancient world had ever seen. Egyptian embalmers were brought in. Persian priests chanted prayers. Greek generals stood guard. They placed his remains inside a solid gold sarcophagus, so heavy it took dozens of men just to move it. They filled the coffin with honey and spices to preserve the flesh. They dressed him in his royal armor, placed his sword at his side, and crowned him with the gold diadem he'd worn in life. Then they loaded it all onto a massive chariot, so large and ornate that it took 64 mules to pull it. Alexander's most loyal soldiers marched beside it, their armor polished, their spears raised. The funeral procession stretched for miles. Behind the chariot came wagons carrying treasure, gifts from cities Alexander had conquered. Behind them came priests and officials and representatives from every corner of the empire. And behind them came thousands of ordinary people, just walking, just watching, just saying goodbye to the man who had changed their world. The destination was Macedonia, his homeland, the royal tombs at Igi, where his father Philip and his ancestors lay buried. The journey would take months, winding through the empire so that every city, every province, every person could pay their respects. It never arrived. Somewhere along the way, someone stole the body of Alexander the Great. But that's not the mystery. That's just where the mystery begins. The real question, the one that's haunted historians, archaeologists, and treasure hunters for 2,300 years, is this. After they stole it, where did they hide it? And more importantly, did someone hide Alexander's tomb on purpose? Because if they did, why? What were they afraid the world would find? Let's go back to the beginning. Back to Babylon, 323 BC. The city was sweltering in the June heat. The Euphrates River ran brown and slow. And in the royal palace, the king of the world was dying. The fever started suddenly. One day, Alexander was planning his next conquest, the Arabian Peninsula. He had maps spread across his tent. He was arguing with his generals about strategy, about supply lines, about the best time of year to cross the desert. He was alive. He was vibrant. He was Alexander. The next day, he couldn't lift his head from the pillow. For 12 days, he suffered. His soldiers camped outside his tent, waiting in silence. They didn't eat. They barely slept. They just waited, staring at the closed flap of the tent, listening to the muffled sounds of priests chanting and physicians arguing. Because their king couldn't die. Their god couldn't die. Gods don't die. On the 11th day, Alexander rallied. He sat up. He asked for water. His generals rushed to his side, hope blazing in their eyes. But it was a lie, a final trick of the body. That night, the fever returned worse than before. On the 12th day, June 10th, 323 BC, Alexander the Great took his last breath. His generals stood around his body. For 6 hours, no one moved. No one spoke. The most powerful man who had ever lived was gone. And in that silence, every single man in that room was thinking the same thing. What happens now? The fighting started almost immediately. Who would rule the empire? Who would take control of the army? Who would get the treasury? Who would sit on the throne? And who would get the body? Because in the ancient world, possessing Alexander's body meant something more than just having a corpse. It meant possessing his legacy, his power, his divine authority. The man who had Alexander's body could claim to be Alexander's true successor. He could use it to legitimize his rule, to rally soldiers to his cause, to convince cities to open their gates. This wasn't just a dead king. This was a weapon, and everyone wanted it. The funeral procession that finally left Babylon was unlike anything the world had ever seen. It took months just to organize. Craftsmen worked day and night building the golden chariot. Priests performed ceremonies to ensure Alexander's safe passage to the afterlife. Generals argued over who would lead the procession, who would march where, who would have the honor of walking closest to the body. When it finally departed, the entire city came out to watch. Thousands lined the streets. Women threw flowers. Men bowed their heads. Children stared with wide eyes at the golden coffin gleaming in the sun. The procession moved slowly, deliberately, giving everyone time to see, to remember, to say goodbye. The plan was simple. Follow the royal road west through Syria, across Anatolia, to the Hellespont. Cross into Europe, march through Greece, and finally, reach Macedonia. The journey would take months, but that was the point. Every city along the way would have its chance to honor the conqueror. Every province would feel connected to his memory. By the time he reached his final rest, the entire empire would have said goodbye. But one man had other plans. His name was Ptolemy, one of Alexander's most trusted generals, now ruling Egypt. And Ptolemy understood something that the others didn't. He understood that controlling Alexander's body meant controlling the empire. Not just symbolically, literally. People would follow the man who had Alexander. Armies would fight for him. Cities would open their gates. The body was a talisman, a relic, a source of power that nothing else could match. So Ptolemy marched his army north from Egypt. He crossed the Sinai Desert. He moved through Palestine. He intercepted the funeral procession somewhere in Syria. And he stole the body. How did he do it? The historians don't agree. Some say he bribed the guards with gold, so much gold that they couldn't say no. Some say he attacked them in the night, his soldiers overwhelming the funeral escort before anyone could react. Some say he simply convinced them, with words and promises, that Alexander would have wanted to be in Egypt, near the god Zeus Ammon who had declared him divine at the Siwa oasis. What we know for certain is this: Alexander's body never reached Macedonia. It was diverted to Egypt. To Memphis first, where it stayed for decades in a temple, hidden from view, guarded by Ptolemy's most loyal soldiers. And then finally, to the city that bore his name, Alexandria. And that's where the mystery really begins. For decades, Alexander's body was kept hidden. Ptolemy and his descendants knew exactly where it was, but they didn't tell anyone. Because as long as they had Alexander, they had power. And power, in the ancient world, was everything. They could point to the body and say, "Look, Alexander is with us. His spirit protects us. His legacy is ours." Then, around 280 BC, Ptolemy IV did something extraordinary. He built a tomb. Not just any tomb, a magnificent, sprawling complex in the heart of Alexandria, made of gold and marble, surrounded by gardens and guarded day and night, open for the world to see. He called it the Soma, or the body. And for the first time in decades, Alexander the Great was on display. And people came. For 600 years, they came. Pilgrims traveled from across the Mediterranean just to stand before his glass coffin. They left offerings, coins, jewels, inscribed prayers. They touched the glass if the guards weren't looking. They whispered his name. Kings and emperors made the journey too. They didn't come as pilgrims. They came as successors, as heirs, as men who wanted to connect themselves to Alexander's legacy. Julius Caesar came in 48 BC. He was 52 years old, the most powerful man in Rome, fresh from his victory in the Civil War. He stood before Alexander's tomb for a long time, just staring at the golden coffin, at the face visible through the glass, preserved for 3 centuries. And then, according to the historians, he started to cry. Not because he was sad, because he was ashamed. At 32, Alexander had conquered the world. At 52, Caesar had done nothing. He had fought wars, yes. He had gained power. But compared to Alexander, he was a provincial politician. He wept at the feet of a man who had achieved more in half the time. Augustus came a few decades later. He was the first Roman emperor, the man who transformed a republic into an empire. He placed a golden crown on Alexander's mummified head. And then, as he leaned in for a closer look, he accidentally broke off part of Alexander's nose. The priests rushed forward, horrified, their hands fluttering. But Augustus just smiled. He paid for it to be fixed, of course. He was an emperor. He could afford it. Caligula came next. He wasn't interested in paying respects. He wasn't interested in legacy or history. He wanted souvenirs. He stole Alexander's breastplate right off the body and wore it around Rome like a trophy, strutting through the streets, demanding that people admire him. Caligula came 2 centuries later. He was obsessed with Alexander. He believed he was Alexander reincarnated. He wore Macedonian clothes. He organized his army in Macedonian formations. And when he visited the tomb, he removed his purple imperial cloak and laid it on the coffin. He left rings, jewels, offerings fit for a god. For 600 years, Alexander's tomb was one of the most famous places in the ancient world, mentioned in travel guides, visited by emperors, described in detail by historians who marveled at its beauty, its grandeur, its power. Then, sometime around 400 AD, it vanished. No records, no inscriptions, no grave robbers boasting about their loot, no Christians claiming they destroyed it, no earthquakes recorded in the history books. Nothing. How does a massive golden tomb, famous for centuries, visited by millions, described by dozens of eyewitnesses, simply disappear? Historians have 5 theories, and every single one is darker than the last. The first theory is the simplest: nature. Alexandria was destroyed by a series of earthquakes and tsunamis between 300 and 800 AD. The entire Mediterranean coast sank in some places. Entire parts of the ancient city are now underwater, swallowed by the sea. Divers have found streets down there, and temples, and houses, and even Cleopatra's palace, with its columns still standing, its floors still tiled. Could Alexander's tomb be down there too? Buried under sand and silt, hidden beneath the waves, waiting for some future generation to find it? It's possible. More than possible. It's likely. The second theory is the Christians. When Christianity took over Egypt in the 4th and 5th centuries, they didn't just convert people. They destroyed. They smashed. They burned. Pagan temples were torn down stone by stone. Statues of the old gods were broken into pieces and used as building material. Mummies were unwrapped and thrown into fires, their linen used for lamp wicks, their bodies burned as fuel. Alexander was worshipped as a god. That made him a target. Did Christian mobs storm his tomb? Did they smash his golden coffin? Did they burn his body? And if they did, why didn't they brag about it? Christians loved to boast about destroying pagan idols. They wrote books about it. They carved inscriptions about it. But there's nothing about Alexander's tomb. Not a single word. The third theory is the Muslims. When the Arabs conquered Egypt in 641 AD, they found a city filled with ancient wonders. The great library was already gone, but the museums and temples and tombs were still there, filled with statues and paintings and the bodies of the old kings. Caliph Omar reportedly gave an order about books. Destroy all books that contradict the Quran. They are heretical. Destroy all books that agree with the Quran. They are redundant. If they felt that way about books, how did they feel about pagan tombs? About statues of false gods? About the body of a man worshipped as divine for 1,000 years? Some historians believe the Muslims destroyed Alexander's tomb deliberately, as an act of religious purification. Others believe they simply ignored it, letting it decay and collapse over time. But again, there's no record, no mention, nothing. The fourth theory is the simplest of all: grave robbers. Alexander's tomb was filled with gold, jewels, artifacts worth fortunes. The glass coffin alone would have been priceless. The golden sarcophagus would have fed a city for a year. Grave robbers have been plundering Egyptian tombs for thousands of years. They're clever, patient, and utterly without scruple. Maybe someone found the tomb, stripped it bare, and kept the location secret to protect their treasure. Maybe the tomb is empty now. Maybe the body is gone, burned or sold, or simply thrown away. But here's the problem with that theory. Grave robbers talk. They brag. They leave clues. They sell their loot, and the loot ends up in museums or private collections. But not a single artifact from Alexander's tomb has ever been found. Not one. If grave robbers took it, where did it go? The fifth theory is the one that keeps archaeologists awake at night. What if the tomb wasn't destroyed? What if it wasn't robbed? What if the priests who guarded it, knowing what would happen if it was found, knowing that the Christians were coming, knowing that the world was changing, hid it on purpose? Think about it. For 600 years, the tomb was open. Thousands visited every year. Then suddenly, in the span of a few decades, it vanished. No trace. No clues. No evidence. That's not destruction. That's not decay. That's erasure. Someone made a decision. Someone gathered the priests, the guards, the caretakers of Alexander's legacy. Someone said, We need to hide this. We need to hide it so well that no one will ever find it. Not the Romans. Not the Christians. Not anyone. And they did it. They moved the body. They sealed the tomb. They covered the entrance. They erased every sign that it had ever existed. The question is, who? Was it the pagan priests, desperate to protect their god from Christian desecration? Was it the Roman authorities, afraid that Alexander's tomb would become a rallying point for rebellion? Was it someone else entirely, someone whose name we'll never know, whose motives we'll never understand? And if they did hide it, what were they afraid of? For 200 years, modern archaeologists have searched for answers. They've dug under the streets of modern Alexandria. The ancient city lies 30 feet below the modern one, buried under centuries of rubble and construction. Archaeologists have found Roman villas down there, with beautiful mosaics and painted walls. They've found Greek temples, with columns and altars and offerings still lying where they fell. They've found Jewish synagogues and early Christian churches, and even the remains of Cleopatra's palace, with its royal quarters and audience halls. But no tomb. They've dived into the Mediterranean, exploring the sunken ruins of the ancient city. The coastline has changed dramatically over 2,000 years. Earthquakes sank entire neighborhoods beneath the waves. Divers have found statues down there, and sphinxes, and massive stone blocks from collapsed buildings. They've mapped streets and plazas and harbor installations. They've found shipwrecks and cargo and the bones of ancient animals. But no tomb. They've used ground-penetrating radar, scanning beneath the modern city for empty chambers. The radar sends waves into the ground and measures how they bounce back. Empty spaces show up as anomalies. And they found them. Chambers deep underground, hidden for thousands of years. Some are natural caves. Some are ancient cisterns. Some are tombs. But which one is Alexander's? In 2025, new excavations began. The Egyptian government, working with international archaeologists, started digging at several promising sites. The results aren't public yet, but the archaeologists involved, they've gone quiet. No interviews, no leaks, no updates, just silence. The world is waiting. But here's the question no one asks out loud. What if they find it? What if Alexander's tomb is finally discovered? What would that mean for history, for archaeology, for our understanding of the ancient world? And more importantly, what if someone doesn't want it found? Let's think about this logically for a moment. The tomb was famous for 600 years. Everyone knew where it was. Then suddenly, in the span of a few decades, it vanished. No records, no clues, no evidence. How is that possible? Either nature destroyed it completely, every last trace, every stone, every artifact, or someone erased it on purpose. And if someone erased it, they had a reason. Alexander wasn't just a king. He was a symbol, a weapon. His body had been stolen once before, used to legitimize Ptolemy's rule in Egypt. Imagine what another ruler could do with it. Imagine if the Romans had found it after conquering Egypt. Imagine if the Christians had used it to prove their triumph over paganism. Imagine if the Muslims had destroyed it to erase the past. Maybe the priests saw all of this coming. Maybe they made a choice. Hide it. Bury it so deep that no one would ever find it. Not the Romans. Not the Christians. Not the Muslims. No one. Or maybe someone found it centuries ago and kept it secret. Imagine that. Imagine a secret so powerful, so dangerous, that generation after generation chose to remain silent. Imagine a conspiracy that has lasted 2,000 years. Imagine a group of people passing down knowledge from parent to child, from master to apprentice, guarding the location of Alexander's tomb with their lives. That's not a tomb anymore. That's a legend. Today, somewhere beneath the streets of Alexandria, or under the Mediterranean Sea, or in an oasis in the desert, Alexander the Great is waiting to be found, waiting to reveal his secrets. The ground-penetrating radar has found empty chambers. The archaeologists are digging. The truth is getting closer every day. But here's the question that keeps them awake at night. If someone did hide Alexander's tomb on purpose, are they still watching? Is there someone today, a government, an organization, a secret group, who knows exactly where it is? Who has known for centuries? Who has kept the secret generation after generation? And if there is, what are they afraid we'll find? What's inside that tomb that's worth hiding for 2,000 years? Is it just a body? Just gold? Just history? Or is it something more? Something that could change everything we think we know about the past? Alexander the Great conquered the world. He never lost a single battle. He built an empire that stretched across 3 continents. He was worshipped as a god while he was still alive. But in death, someone conquered him. Someone stole his body, hid his tomb, erased his legacy from history. For 2,300 years, the secret has held. But secrets don't last forever. The radar is scanning. The archaeologists are digging. The truth is coming. And when it comes, the world will finally know. Did someone hide Alexander's tomb on purpose? The answer is waiting. Beneath the sand. Beneath the sea. Beneath 23 centuries of silence. Waiting for you to find it.